It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS AM 1160 and 101.1 FM. As I said, Mr. Bob Pollock is with us this morning, but by telephone. We still have 479-1160 left for you if you want to call and ask Bob a question. Good morning. Are you ensconced in a place you're going to avoid all this rain that's coming this weekend?
I hope so.
would be a good idea, huh?
You had heavy rain yesterday, didn't you?
We had some really heavy stuff yesterday. Now they're saying, and get this, they're saying this weekend, Sunday, 1 to 2 inches of rain. And some places, they said, could get as much as 5 inches of rain. Now there's no way to prepare for something like that, but are there some things that we should be doing that, obviously we want to keep the water away from running into the house and everything, but with plants and everything to protect them when you get really stormy, windy weather?
Well, anything that's potentially at risk from that. So if you have, let's say you have container, potted plants and things in containers that are out, of course you can move those around hopefully and put them in a safe spot up against a wall or the house or whatever to help shield them. And anything that has any heights to it like that could topple over. Of course, you can move those things around. There's things out in the yard, though, that, with trees and shrubbery there's not a lot you can do with them in a hurry. So that goes back really to maintaining those trees and shrubs as best you can, and pruning and removing dead wood and just having a good structure there so that when you do get heavy rain events or storm fronts and heavy winds, that those trees are better able they can move, but the structure, the branch structure, the trunk structure is such that it's able to withstand that and sway back and forth. When you get into double trunk trees or trees that you might have a nice main trunk starting up, but then it splits off and you have 2 leaders up there, depending on how those attach, those can be weak points. Decay can start in there, and so when we do get a storm, then that can cause issues. Split out, and that's when it usually happens. And when you see those splits occur and those trees go down and you look at where it split off, if there's a lot of darker wood there, that decay may not be evident till that happens. So just, proper care, and there's professionals out there, arborists in the industry that can actually look at those things and help assess whether those are, how much risk is there, and then, take the best action that you can, either to preserve the tree or remove limbs when necessary, or sometimes it's just a tree that kind of grew up there over time and wasn't maintained, then those sometimes are the most riskiest ones that need attention or need to be removed to prevent damage to property and person.
Yeah. When you get to an 80 or 90-foot tree and it's up there so far, you're right, that arborist can come in and he can not only tell you what the potential risk is, but he can tell you if that tree goes down and give you a good idea of which direction it's going to go.
Yeah, usually. Although sometimes, with these little microbursts and events like that, it's pretty tough to tell. Things can go awry in a hurry, and
they'll go where they want to
go. That's right. wherever that wind and then if there's other trees and things in its path, it might have gone this way, but because it bounced off of this one and bounced off of that one, it didn't quite go where you thought it was going to.
Yeah.
But so those are in some cases it's a little difficult to prepare for these things. Things you might and results of some of these heavy rains and this continued wet weather, it's just hard to get anything done well, and it's hard to prevent, even with efforts to prevent some disease development from happening. These heavy rains and things just muck up fields and gardens and splash soil all over the place, and So diseases like Phytophthora, some of those different Phytophthora diseases that attack the root systems of plants, those things can become more prevalent now. Black rot, which is actually a bacterial disease that can get on cabbage and broccoli and cauliflower and kale. Those things, with warmer weather and then wet weather, those diseases can start appearing pretty regularly now, and there's not a lot we can do about them once they get started.
Yeah.
So those are things that we might find more prevalent just because of all this wet weather.
Hey, talk a little bit, if you would, about cleaning out the garden at the end of the growing season. A lot of people might want to just say, I'm just going to leave it there. Like the tomatoes, we'll leave those plants in there, the seeds will fall down, and they'll self-seed the garden a little bit. How important is it to clear out all that vegetation from the garden?
If things are healthy, it's not that big of a deal. You could leave it there. If things are diseased, and depending on the disease, some things have life stages that are more prevalent. They're more able to, they'll overwinter, so they'll have a life cycle stage that will overwinter here, and then when you replant those tomatoes back in there next year, or cabbage or whatever crop, then those can be more susceptible to that. The spores are already there, and then you get a susceptible plant there next year, and then everything's ready to go. So anything that's diseased, whether it be a fungal disease or a bacterial disease, those plants should be removed from the garden. You can put them on a compost pile. The faster, and sometimes even with say that black rot, the quicker you can work that crop into the soil and get it to break down and decay, that's a good option for that. So getting those plants out of there, and especially if you're gardening, and you don't have the option to move things around very well, that this is my gardening spot, this is where it gets the most sun, and this is where I have to have it, it becomes more important to, when you see things, diseases occurring, to get that stuff out of there. The sooner the better, so that you minimize the chance of that continuing or for following years.
Talking with Bob Pollock.
Because it's pretty hard. Because it's pretty hard to rotate. When you have a small gardening spot, it's hard to, even you move things 5 feet, well, that disease is still going to be able to move that 5 feet.
Yeah. One of the things we have talked about in the past when we have diseased plants is how to dispose of them, and whether you can just drag it off and throw it in the woods that's 20, 30 feet away from your garden, or whether you should bag that stuff up. What's the general guideline for things of that nature? It
really varies by
disease.
Specific disease and its ability to overwinter and how many years the spores can be in the soil. Some things are short-lived. The Phytophthora group of diseases, some of those are short-lived. They have to have that living plant in order for them to survive. So as long as the plant's there, they can keep going. When you kill the plant, work it into the ground, get it decayed, then that disease life cycle ends at that point, and we just wait for it to. Of course, that's one of the ones. And late blight is a good example of a Phytophthora that moves in on storm fronts. So that in that one, and of course, late blight, people usually want to know where it is. Well, Center County, a week ago, they found it on tomatoes in Center County, and then late last week, I think they found it on potatoes in that same vicinity. So that's as close as it's officially gotten to our part of the world here.
Yeah. Speaking of potatoes, there are certain root vegetables like potatoes and carrots are another that I think of, that some folks leave in the ground as the winter comes along, and then they go and dig them up as they need them. that I don't know how common that is anymore, but is that a good choice to do?
Oh, I think it's definitely an option that you can do, because if you don't have the ability to store it and you want to have that availability, then that's a method that you can do it. Now, used to be a lot of people would have root cellars, or they would have places that would stay cool and maintain temperature that would store things well. But in most cases, most people don't have that anymore. Mm-hmm. So that's not an option to harvest it and then put it in that cold storage. So in the ground becomes another way to do that. And then, of course, there's risks involved there too, because, if we have wet conditions all fall and into the winter, that can cause those crops to start and rot. Yeah.
Should you cover it over with straw or something like that?
Yeah, you can, depending on the temperatures, as the temperatures go down and get colder, and if you're trying to keep the ground from freezing, you want to keep it cold, but above freezing, then you do have to be able to temper that temperature, and putting that mulch on there will help to do that.
All right.
It'll slow down that whole process. It may eventually freeze, but having that straw layer on there will help slow that process down, give you more time.
There you go. All right, get your boat, get your umbrella, and get ready for the weekend.
There you go. That's kind of been the story this summer.
It sure has. He's Bob Pollock from the Extension Service. See you, sir.
Thank you.
I meant to say see you, sir, but my voice wasn't working right, or at least my tongue wasn't.